What deep, dark secret did you learn about the seemingly perfect family? I grew up with a girl down the street who lived with her mom and stepdad. Stepdad was pretty cool, according to 7-year-old me. Nice guy. To find out, he'd been raping my friend for years. It had been going on so long, had been so normalized to her, that she thought I was doing that with my dad, and our other friend was doing it with her dad. To her, your father figure having sex with you was just something you did. I was too young to know what happened at the time it was discovered, but I do remember my mom asking me if he had ever touched me and her being very concerned he might have hurt me. Was years before I found out what actually happened. My next door neighbors. Husband, wife, and 2 young girls, and my neighbors down the road. Husband, wife, and 3 young girls were the best of friends and did everything together. They went on vacations together, they went out to dinner together, they even bought a timeshare together. My family had to move to a different state for 2 years, and this was during the housing crash of 2008, so our house never sold, so we just moved right back in. Well, when we were cleaning up our house to move back in, we found a Karma Sutra style book in a bathroom drawer and a mysterious bleach stain on some carpet. We had told all the neighbors where the extra key was in case they wanted to store stuff temporarily or take cover during a hurricane. We live in Florida, or whatever, since there wasn't anything of ours there to steal. We just assumed some teenager couldn't find anything better to jack off to and tried to clean up his mess. After a few months of being moved back in, our next door neighbors move out in the middle of the night. They left in such a hurry they left their cat. We come to learn that the husband of our next door neighbors and the wife of the other neighbors were having an affair and using our house as a rendezvous and used baby monitor milliseconds to keep an eye on the kids. When we moved back in, they had to start taking business trips and they eventually got caught. The wife on the next door neighbors was willing to work things out but didn't want to be in the same neighborhood as that whore. That was convenient as the husband down the street was basically a hillbilly Jason Momoa and was threatening to kill them. In the end we got a cat, which was neat. He died a few years ago but was a great cat. When I was a kid I knew a set of twins who were friends with my older sister. The twins, both female, were straight-A students and always dressed modestly. Neither girl was allowed to date and their parents owned a huge house with multiple cars and the girls never seemed to want for anything. Anyway, a few years later the parents were busted because apparently they owned another house a few streets away. Less lavish, and they were running a brothel out of it with girls the same age as their daughters, who were around 18 at this time and both in university. I just found it very ironic that they were so protective over their own daughters but were whoring out other people's daughters. I worked at an Amazon store. The owner of the place hired this kid whose parents went to his church. The day he was supposed to start, the whole family shows up. Mom, dad, son. They all start working. The guy was too spineless to let them go, so they all got hired. They were pretty much bottom of the barrel workers and just kind of kept themselves aside from pleasantries. We were kind of a rowdy bunch and they didn't fit in, and also 3 of them did the work of 1 person. My coworker started referring to them as the Dahmer family because the father resembled Jeffrey Dahmer and they were all a little bit too idyllic and Christian. Then it started to get weird. The son regularly called out, citing stomach issues and saying certain tasks made his legs tired and things like that. Mr. Dahmer started having these intense fits of rage where he would go off on us for minor things. Ms. Dahmer started to become strangely attached to me and regularly bought me strange gifts like holistic headache creams, a neti pot, organic tea, etc. Years later I find out that the son had AIDS. The mother and the son were a little too close for that age. The father eventually got caught doing some strange things and they got a divorce. Miss Dahmer, on my last week working there, started asking me about demons and things. On my last day she gave me this manila envelope that had this 30-page manifesto she written as a letter to me about how she was infested with demons and all kinds of crazy Song of Solomon type things. She thought I was infested with demons too. My family seemed pretty perfect until my folks got divorced when I was 13. They both assured me that it wasn't anyone's fault. As it turns out, well, I wasn't the reason, I was the catalyst. My dad started to notice that, as I aged, I shared no physical features with him. He confronted my mom about it and she revealed the truth. I was the product of a drunken one-night stand. My mom and dad had dated briefly and then broke up. Shortly after the breakup, mom went to a party and hooked up with some guy. When she discovered that she was pregnant, she contacted my dad and told him that I was his son. They got married shortly after I was born. Dad agreed that no one else needed to be told, but the fact that the whole marriage had been built on a lie brought a lot of bad shit to the surface, and they decided to call it quits. My perfect family was shattered, but what's worse, a lot of terrible things have come to the surface in the years since that have poisoned all but a few of my memories of growing up. My dad vanished from me and my sister's lives for about a year after the divorce. When he came back to start his visitation with us, he was in a relationship with another woman and she was already pregnant. From age 14 to 21, we still had a father-son relationship, albeit a tumultuous one. I blamed both him and mom for the divorce at first, but I eventually came around, and by the time I joined the Air Force we were thick as thieves. Then I got married. Dad didn't approve of my wife and we started arguing bitterly. Eventually I cut a little too deep, and he contacted my mom and demanded that either she tell me the truth or my paternity or he would. I was 21 when I found out, and it staggered me. Not surprisingly, it brought me and Dad closer together and turned me against my mom for a while. Eventually Dad divorced his second wife and things faltered between us. He's a bitter alcoholic who can't come to any of me or my siblings' major life events because he has warrants for unpaid child support. I haven't spoken to him in 2 years because it's just easier not having to deal with his drama all the time. I still consider him my dad. Me and mom eventually had it out and things healed nicely between us. The only thing that hasn't been resolved is the true nature of my paternity. She insists she doesn't know who my sperm donor was, but several people in my family have told me she does. I haven't pressed the issue. I found out more about my family after my great-grandfather passed away than I ever knew. My mom's side is from a small coal mining town in West Virginia. After my great-grandfather passed away, I found out my great-grandmother was actually my great-great-aunt. My great-grandmother's sister. I don't know how the once removed thing works. Turns out my real great-grandmother was a prostitute with many kids by different men. Being unfit to be the mother of my grandfather, my great-granddad shacked up with her sister, Rosie. Rosie was a raging alcoholic, and it wasn't out of character for her to drink herself into oblivion, and when an ambulance would come to pump her stomach, she would shoot at them with a revolver to get them to leave. Unfortunately, she had also been cheating on my great-grandfather, John. John was respected by everyone in the community, and I've never heard an ill word spoken about him. He went to the man that was cheating with Rosie. Both men worked in the coal mine, and he said, "I'm a good Christian man and I forgive you, but if I see you at my house, you're a dead man." 2 weeks later he shot him in the head with a revolver when he found him at his house. John went to jail for 2 years because in West Virginia at the time, it was justifiable homicide. While in jail, the oldest son, my grandfather, was only 14, but there was no money coming into the family, so he lied about his age so he could drive to the coal mine. He dropped out of school in the 8th grade and started work as a blaster, his first day in the mine. My grandmother was born in Jersey and her mother died when she was 7, left with an inept alcoholic father. She was put in horrible foster homes. She was sometimes beaten or kept in a dark closet under the stairs for misbehaving. Harry Potter style. Eventually, at age 15 she ran away with a friend and ended up in that small West Virginia town. She got a job serving tables, where she met my 14-year-old grandfather drinking beer. After lying about his age, and they've been together ever since. They're now both 78 and 79 in a $1 million home near DC, with just as many stories as you could imagine. I doubt anyone will read this, but it's pretty wild how small decisions echo for generations. Family whose parents were popular and well-liked in the area back when they were in high school. Their daughters were all popular and well-liked as well in high school. They were all the type of people that had no strong opinions and did not care to argue, just kin to positive people. People automatically were kind of drawn to them and for that everyone in town likes them. They have some ownership in a local dealership too and their girls are on a lot of the commercials. One day, one of their daughters, same grade as me back in high school, let it slip to me that she found a hidden camera in the pool changing room at their pool house. She said it in kind of a "oh yeah, haha" shrug. Found a camera, my dad is so silly. It kind of seems like she was assuming he put it there to catch them drinking, but she realizes that it was probably more than that, but she just figures boys will be boys type thing. The dad looks like the creepiest motherfucker ever and he has been likely videotaping not only his daughters but all of their female friends, which is like nearly all of the popular high school women in my town. This isn't my family, but I absolutely have to share this. The only reason I am is it's been about 2 years since they discovered and are more comfortable joking about it now. I never asked about the aftermath. I know two girls who are sisters who had their family issues and whatever, but were happy with each other for the most part. Their dad always went on business trips and he wasn't home a lot. It did seem kind of suspicious because he was a chef I think, or he made recipes for a kitchen. Something weird where it didn't really warrant business trips. But I don't think they really thought anything of it. It turns out the sister's family is actually his second family and the other family had two brothers who were both older than the sisters. He had put 3/4 of the kids through college and the fourth was currently in school. They found out because the other mother of the other family was digging on Facebook one day and found a picture of their dad and the girl's mom. She sent the sister's mom a death threat and they pieced it together from there. It wasn't even my family, but I was absolutely floored by this. The dad was molesting and beating the foster boys, 10 to 12 YO, while the mom was addicted to prescription pills and banging the neighbor. The family lived a few streets over from me growing up and very devout Christians, which, at the time, I thought was super admirable. I was an early teen who rode his bike all over the neighborhood as a matter of course, so I was initially drawn to the area that had a bunch of kids roaming around including the hot blonde. Big mistake. The parents got super weird with their insistence that I go out on a date with their daughter that was my age. To which I wasn't attracted at all and were kinda pushy about us kissing in front of them. I wasn't ready and I sure as hell wasn't about to be forced like that. My many misadventures with this family were instrumental in disenchanting me with the idea that faith was some magic bullet that cured the evils of the world. It wasn't until many years after my initially meeting the family that I realized what was going on and that the insistence that the allegations of sexual abuse and the neighbor being some kind of predator, being inappropriate with the mom for no reason, were all lies. The dad was a total fundy psycho who fooled around with little boys and then beat them. The mom was a bad kind of addicted to what I'm assuming were opiates. And not just the opiate of the masses, and would screw the neighbor as a sort of repressed rebellious thing. Last I heard from these two, the mother had moved out of state to live with her dad, separating from her husband who later joined her. Current status unknown. The oldest daughter, the awkward date girl, was hung up on the fundy religious stuff, got knocked up, and married poorly, wasting a lot of potential and really perpetuating her crap situation. The second daughter, the hot blonde, got knocked up with a good guy, messed up that situation by cheating around a bunch, got into hard drugs, lost custody of first kid. Who's an awesome kid, had more kids, more drugs, at Al shit show. The two foster boys were sent back into foster care and I didn't hear from them again. Sometime last year I was inquiring via my mother as to how many siblings her parents had. I think I was reading something about people from big families being more likely to have more children or some shit. Anyhow, I'm told that my grandfather had one brother and one sister. His brother it seems was a lot slow in the head, his sister as far as I'm aware is perfectly normal. I ask what happened to them and are they still alive. So mum tells me this brilliant little family secret. Sis comes to granddad one day and tells him she's being beaten by her husband. So good ole granddad bails old mate up, gives him a flogging, and tells him if he ever lays a hand on his sister again he's dead. Skip ahead a week, granddad decides to go check in on sis, doesn't announce he's coming. As im led to believe was the common thing to do back then. Granddad rolls up to one of the shearing sheds on sis's husband's farm. Finds the guy and 3 others chock-a-block molesting my aunts who are 8 and 14. Granddad goes Rambo, grabs a big set of shears and slaughters his brother-in-law and the 3 other pedo fuckers there. Sis is nowhere to be found. Takes my aunts back home for grandma to try and de-traumatize. He then heads on up to now dead brother-in-law's parents' farm. Some honor thing about being honest and hearing it from him not second-hand, Papa dead guy doesn't take it well, turns on granddad sis that for some reason is at their house that day. Slaps her whatever, granddad grabs a rifle and blows his head off. Hey retarded brother, turns out granddad's brother is gonna die soon from some medical shit, so the family convinces him to tell the police he killed all those people. Which he happily does because he loves his siblings and he doesn't really know what's happening. All my aunts, uncles, brothers. I came 20 years after my closest brother, everyone basically knows all this shit went down and they just never talk about it. They adopted the attitude of granddad killed a wife beater and a pedophile he was protecting his family, he's a hero. I spent a good amount of time with my grandparents when I was young and they were alive, I would never have guessed any of this shit could ever have happened. I used to have a group of friends and one of them came from one of those aggressively perfect families. Dad was a mayor, mom was the perfect mayor's wife, and the kids were all successful in their own way. There was a lot of Colgate grins all around, and they lived in a newly built villa in one of the richest villages in my country. There was this tradition of my friends and their families going on a ski snowboarding trip because the parents of our friends got along very well too. On the second day of one of those trips, the mom of the perfect family was waiting for the group of other adults to catch up. She was a better skier than the rest when all of a sudden, she was blindsided by a skier coming down the slope too fast, crashing into her from behind. She took a nasty fall, breaking one of her ankles as I recall. The perpetrator took off and perfect mom couldn't get a good look at the guy. She spent the rest of the day at the hospital and the family holiday went sour. Now here's the kicker. In the biggest chalet we rented, there was a communal room we used to hang out after each skiing session, and a few days after the accident, there was an odd tension in the communal room that hadn't been there the days before. Soon after I arrived, one of my friends took me aside and spilled the beans. It turned out that the hit-and-run skier had been her husband. On the outside we look like a pretty successful family. Plenty of money, have lived in modernized houses from the mid-1800s. Siblings have had great success at very early ages with huge accomplishments. Older sibling is stressed beyond belief, their so is in severe crippling depression. I've been through similar things for the past years, but it looks like they have no way out of it. Dad is mentally abusive, which means he has alienated 3 of his children, with the youngest still loving him. The youngest child is mentally unstable and even more abusive than he is. During his and my mom's relationship, he's broken up several times to have sex with some random girl, only to get together with my mom again. They officially announced that they would get divorced a month before getting pregnant with the youngest sibling. Most silent family birthday ever, no one seemed happy another child was on the way. Mom seems completely content with the situation. My mom's side of the family is fairly big, and because we live fairly close together, I used to go to school with my cousins, and I see my aunts and uncles frequently. My mom's eldest sister is seemingly perfect. She's beautiful, always perfectly dressed, has a very well-paying job, 4 successful kids, a husband that basically worships her, and what looks to be the perfect marriage. Only, she's not my biological aunt. And she has an awful lot of secrets. She was adopted at the age of 9 by my grandparents who were very young at the time. I won't put how young, but the age gap between her and them is very small. But that's another very complicated story. They pushed the adoption through because she was being shifted from foster home to foster home and being constantly abused. Physical, sexual, emotional, starved, etc. Her growth was stunted and she was very behind in school. My grandparents moved to another city, had 3 other kids, and raised her as their biological daughter. She was a model child as I understand. But grades, never did drugs, etc. worked very hard. My aunt got married to her high school boyfriend and lived in blissful happiness till she got pregnant. I have always thought of her as being a fantastic and loving mom to my cousins, just as she's been a supportive aunt to me. Turns out she didn't want kids, though due to her horrific early childhood, and spent her pregnancy isolating herself and hating the baby. She only continued the pregnancy for my uncle's sake, who desperately wanted kids, although when my cousin was born, she adored her and spent most of her time with her, and they have been very close ever since. She then had 3 other kids. The last 2 being twins, 2 more kids than she could logically handle, but didn't cope well with 4 kids in her career. She's very driven and had been career-orientated from a young age, by the time my twin cousins were 9, and my mom was about 5 months pregnant with my sisters and I. We're triplets, she just stopped coping altogether. My parents lived across the other side of the country at that point, and my mom got the shock of her life when her 9-year-old niece turned up at the high school she was teaching at. My cousin was getting horribly bullied at school, and her siblings were almost assisting the bullies. She had tried to tell her mom, but her mom had simply brushed it off, not really understanding the issue. As things got worse and worse, my cousin was apparently contemplating suicide and in one last desperate attempt to get help, had stolen money from her mom to buy herself a plane ticket to get to my mom, who is her godmother and who she trusted more than anyone. I don't know how she got on the plane, I'll have to ask her. What ensued was essentially an in-family custody battle over my cousin. My parents saw the issue, as did my grandparents and my cousin's dad, but my aunt didn't. My aunt chucked a hiss fit that my parents were keeping her daughter from her and refused to acknowledge that she could have done anything wrong. Shortly after this, my uncle gave their other 3 kids to my grandparents to look after as my aunt was so unpredictable. My grandparents did everything to keep their daughter from seeing her kids for fear of their safety, and this only made my aunt angrier. Her husband threatened to divorce her as he wanted to be able to raise their kids in safety. It all finally stopped when my grandmother told my aunt she had never been more disappointed in her, and my aunt made some serious evaluations and changes to her life. My cousins were given back to their parents, and the situation was put in the past. My aunt went back to being her normal sweet happy self and has never since done anything like this. This only came out after I started to question why my cousin treated my parents like her second parents. Even still, and why there seemed to be a huge chunk of time that no one would speak about. None of my younger cousins know, and she gets along well with all her children. Only, I know everyone lives in fear of her doing it again. Now I wonder what other secrets my perfect family is hiding. Thanks for watching. If you like the video, please drop a like, and to stay up to date with my latest videos, make sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel by clicking the button under this video.